Hi, I'm Dr. Cindy Dupuy. I have a PhD in learning disabilities. I do diagnostic assessment, advocacy, and intervention. I'm also an adult with dyslexia and dysgraphia.
My name's Kim Sherman. I work with kids with dyslexia, dysgraphia, ADHD, and I too have ADHD.
Okay, so we got sent numbers from a parent in New Zealand who asked us to put up the score profile. So we're going to show you each page of the score profile and give you 3 seconds to screenshot it. Then stop, take your time to do your own analysis. And when you're ready, jump back into the video. And Kim and I are going to talk about what we see in the overall profile. And I'm having a hard time getting my page resized, but we will make that work here. All right. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so everybody take your minute, look at the numbers, and now, Kim, let's jump in. So, tell me what the first thing is that you noticed when you looked at the IQ.
I say, wow, this child is very bright. And wow, verbal comprehension. I mean, great IQ score, definitely college bound, if according to IQ score. But I start to look at the work. Let's see, his fluid reasoning 118. You taught me that if that's very big difference from his IQ, that's a little weird, but I don't think that's a very big difference. His working memory and his digit span could be impacted by maybe ADHD because that's
Mm-hmm.
significantly different. His processing speed could also be impacted by ADHD, or it could be something else with
Mm-hmm.
phonological, something else with the loop in the brain with processing language.
Well, remember, coding is translating numbers to symbols,
Oh
and
shoot,
symbol
then there's
search is finding the exact match. So there's
okay,
not
so
a lot of language involved in that. I understand why you're going there, but
okay.
um, so when you see a coding score like that low, one thing that pops up is the possibility of dysgraphia, right?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Oh
Okay.
man. Yes, of course.
Um,
Transferring information and processing it and transferring it with your fingers down to the next.
yeah. And so then the verbal comprehension is in phenomenal shape. This is a smart, capable kid. So you see those as we initially do that look over. The nonverbal IQ makes sense, relatively high, not dramatically different. Okay, the early reading skills.
What does that mean? We don't usually do that one.
The early reading skills is a battery of phonological processing on the WIAT 3.
Hmm.
Um, and it just kind of looks at, can you sound match and can you play with phonemes? Can you break words into sounds? Can you blend words back together? It's just kind of a basic low level phonemic awareness kind of task.
This kid is little. This kid is how old again? 8?
8 years old. Yeah, please
So
ignore the age up here. He's 8. Okay.
okay. So he's dealing
Um,
with all different vowel sounds, not just
yeah.
short vowels. Okay.
Okay. What do you notice in the oral language?
Something's up with that. He's having trouble. It's not as high as his other very high scores.
Yeah,
So
and let's come back and take a look at that oral expression because I have a hypothesis around that. What do you
okay.
notice in the reading?
Wow. I could see how a parent would get confused and say, but it says he's got great reading skills. And now you see big problems with
Yeah,
comprehension
yeah.
coding. So
Okay.
one of the cue things too that people don't need is like, why do we need a pseudocode decoding? Well, pseudocode decoding means he's not memorizing language.
He's
Um,
actually having to apply in real time, right?
yep, he's having to have to apply the rules of language to fake words.
Now, the written language is particularly interesting because the mother mentioned, so on the Wyatt, there's 2 sentence level tasks. One of them is sentence combining, and one of them is sentence building. And in the sentence combining, they give you 2 to 3 stimulus sentences, and you have to combine them into a sentence. And then on the sentence building, they give you a target word and blank lines and say, write a sentence using the target word. Okay. And the student kind of broke down and was overwhelmed by that, and they couldn't complete the task. Okay.
I mean, this
And
is a
then,
huge indicator of something is very wrong here.
yeah. And then math is in really good shape, which is not particularly surprising given how strong the visual spatial is and how strong the fluid reasoning is.
But if he has dysgraphia, maybe, wouldn't he have to represent all his calculations with writing?
Well, no, because on the WIAT, if you write down the right answer and you don't show your work, you still get full credit.
So he's doing it all in his head.
Potentially.
Maybe.
Potentially. And also remember, he's 8. So the level of computation expected at his age is relatively low.
Yeah.
Meaning he's not doing, 4-digit multiplication by 2-digit multiplication or long division. So if he's doing multi-digit multiplication, that's going to boost his score significantly. So now, do you know what the addition and subtraction subtests are on the WIAT?
No.
Okay, so they're a timed how many simple addition subtraction, well, how many simple addition problems can you complete in a time span? How many subtraction problems can you complete within a time span? So that's like our one little tiny peek into, is word retrieval or rapid automatic naming an issue? And theoretically, based on those scores, that may be okay. Okay. But you've got to come back and ask then what's happening with the reading, right?
Because you're saying he's able to retrieve pictures of math facts in his head, but he's not able to decode pseudo words and he has poor comprehension.
Yeah. Okay. So let's come back and let's talk a little bit more about the IQ test for a minute. So the verbal comprehension is super, super robust, meaning I give you 2 words, you tell me how they're related, and you've got a robust vocabulary. It is fascinating to me that with that 139 verbal comprehension, that oral expression is not higher. Okay.
Right. Because we do sometimes see kids with incredible oral
Right.
expression, that kind of.
Now, part of that may be that the child was identified as being on the autism spectrum, and the oral expression task requires the ability to understand what your listener is listening for, the ability to explain enough detail. So some of the characteristics that may be associated with the autism spectrum disorder could be affecting the oral expression, or this could be underlying issues in oral language that aren't clearly showing up yet, but are impeding his written production. Meaning, I'm having a hard time formulating what I want to say to you.
Okay.
And therefore, when I'm speaking aloud, I can't always convey what I'm trying to say. And then it's even compounded more when I go to write.
Are you talking about in his brain, he's having trouble organizing the syntactic structure of the sentences?
Right. How do I communicate what I'm trying to communicate in a grammatically correct way?
But I also like the fact that something that I didn't understand with kids on the spectrum too is that difficulty when you said the difficulty with inferencing what the person wants from me.
Yes.
What do you want from me? Is it because for the person, sometimes they think it's just what I know, but they're not saying, I wonder what she wants from me.
Right. So if this were my student, and the tendency for most speech language pathologists would be to look at this and go, oral language is great. And I would say, not necessarily, because the scope of these measures is fairly limited, given the autism spectrum disorder, given the breakdown with sentence combining and sentence building, there is a potential that there are underlying oral language issues that need to be further evaluated. So I would be really curious to see how this child would do on the self, the clinical evaluation of language fundamentals. There's a sentence assembly task where you get parts of a sentence and you have to make two logical, grammatically correct sentences, moving the various parts around.
So you could test his syntactic, his ability to do that from doing that.
Right.
And then once you eliminate that, what would you do next?
Then I would also look at book 2 and book 3 of the Castle, which is the comprehensive assessment of spoken language. I would be interested in grammatical morphemes, grammaticality judgment. Grammatical morphemes is, can I conjugate words correctly? And grammaticality judgment is, can I recognize when there's a grammatical error in a sentence? And if he speaks correctly and that's, you don't hear grammatical errors, not a problem. Then you could kind of skip that. I'd still do the sentence assembling because I want to see if there's that flexibility and understanding that the sentence has to have meaning and make sense. And then obviously looking at the higher order language on the Castle. I don't think you're going to see anything on the lower level stuff in terms of similarities and not similarities, but synonyms and antonyms and a receptive vocabulary. That's not going to tell us anything that we don't already know. It's when we get to the sentence level structure and the making inferences and using contextual cues. And then another test that I would be really interested in is called the OPUS, the Oral Passage Understanding Scale, where you read a passage aloud and then you ask a series of questions, and the kid doesn't have the passage to look back at to see how much they can remember and understand from the passage.
You're reading the passage to the kid.
Yes.
So that eliminates the dyslexia stuff.
Yeah. So that would be a really interesting comparison against the reading comprehension because they're kind of parallel tasks, right? On the reading comprehension, you read the passage and you answer the questions. The difference being you go back and look back in the passage. With the Opus, you have to listen and do it all from memory, right?
But if he has dyslexia, his reading comprehension may not be good because of that.
Right. And so this is where the WIAT, no test is perfect, no test does everything. This is where a gray oral reading test, where you have to read the passages aloud, take the passage away, and ask the open-ended questions, again, helps paint a different picture so we understand, is the reading comprehension due to a fluency issue? Because we don't know that right now. Yes, she's got a reading fluency score, but this is only at the word level, right? It's how many words can you read in the first 30 seconds of the test being administered. It doesn't get at passage level production, like read an entire story and then be able to answer questions about it. This is a kid that clearly needs some nuanced digging to really kind of unearth what's going on. I have questions about the orthographic processing piece, and I definitely want to nail down the rapid automatic naming. Like those we definitely need to look at. So for the orthographic processing, you could do a Jordan left-right reversal test. You could do the test of orthographic competence, second edition, that would look at can your eye pick up that detail? Okay. What about with the written expression? You've already mentioned it. What do we need?
He needs a BRE-VMI,
Yeah,
visual motor integration test, to see if he has difficulty communicating his brain to his fingers.
Yeah. I'm also really curious on the alphabet writing fluency. And this would be a question to go back to the examiner, ask them, was it a limit in the number of letters he could produce in the time constraint, and or how many errors did he make in his letter formation when he wrote?
Is it
Because
judging backwards? I mean, it's judging everything.
yes, yes, if you don't produce a legible letter, if you reverse a letter, you lose credit on that letter. So I would be really curious about that. And then the spelling, I would want to see what kind of spelling errors he made relative to the kind of decoding errors he made in reading real words, right?
Mhm.
Do we have the same kinds of issues around certain patterns? Does he break words into syllables? Does he know how to sound out the syllables? Does he have any sense of the rules of syllable division and how syllable division drives spelling? Okay. Um, and so, and then, we just put up the videos on how dysgraphia affects math. She should be super aware of that because he clearly has the potential to be very, very good at math. And that may be kind of the thing that makes him get up and want to go to school every day.
Mhm.
But if we let the dysgraphia get in the way of that, that's going to be hard for him to continue to progress.
And as your math becomes more language based, he might get discouraged and say, I'm bad at math because he's having difficulty interpreting the word problem and also expressing his information on
Yeah.
paper.
Now, I would also want to go back and I would want to look at the fluid reasoning measures to see how much how consistent he was in his performance, meaning on the matrix reasoning, did he miss one, get a couple, miss one, get a couple, miss one, get a couple? Or did he go along pretty clippingly and then missed one, got one, and then suddenly couldn't do them anymore?
And
Okay.
what will that tell you?
That would tell you that you're just at ceiling, like he just can't do it anymore. But that inconsistency tells me that there's a potential there for attention deficit. Okay. And she
Is
said
that the only thing that tells you attention deficit on this whole IQ?
no, no, not
What
at
else?
all.
What else makes you sniff it?
Digit span, picture span,
Okay.
because of the working memory.
Yeah.
Um, I would want to look at the protocol to figure out the protocol being the piece of paper where the clinician writes down all the information, to see the level of consistency in his performance kind of across the entire measure. Did he miss easy items and similarities and get hard ones right? With an 18, likely not. Um, but I'm also a little curious on block design. Did he lose bonus points for speed on any of them? Or did he just kind of crank all the way through and then get stuck on the final item? Because the final item is super hard. But the visual puzzles looks great, and that's a real strength. And the visual spatial and the problem solving involved in that is part of the reason that the math is so robust.
And the reason why this is so important for a parent of this child is because you need to celebrate this with this is will help guide him towards activities and jobs and things like that that he will prosper on and
Now,
feel.
yeah, now people would look at the listening comprehension and say, oh, look, that's great. The listening comprehension also relies on background knowledge. And this kid clearly has a lot of background knowledge. And it doesn't have the same level of attention to detail as, for example, the listening comprehension on the oral and written language scales known as the OWLs. And that would be another interesting contrast is on the OWLs listening comprehension, where you only have a limited time span to respond. Is there a difference between his performance on that and the open-ended on the WIAT? But this is a really interesting kiddo. So now that we've kind of looked at the profile, Kim, what would intervention look like?
Well, first, because you do something called, you taught me this a long time ago, dynamic interventionist testing. Um, I know that you would go and do,
Diagnostic
right?
teaching is another way to put it, yes.
Wait, how did I say it? I said it wrong.
It's diagnostic teaching, but that's okay. Let's just keep going forward.
Whatever it is, you keep drilling down till you get the specific reason. And then you give me, as a remediation specialist, my recipe book of what to do.
Right.
So, of course, if I would be working with him and trying to clear up this dyslexia business and see what's going on there and start finding all the areas where he's missing phonological processing, etc. And
You would
then
go back and you would take a look at his ability to produce phonemes, even though he did well on that one task. You still have to drive down in to see, does he have consistent letter sound correspondence? Does he know where the phonemes are made in his mouth? Can he differentiate between different phonemes, right? Okay.
yes, you have to go back to the beginning, and I have to do this with all ages of
Yeah.
kids. And then, of course, I would definitely have to look at his pencil grip and his writing skills, and have to, I mean, and the earlier you do that, the better with a kid with
Right.
dysgraphia. And then I would start teaching him basically formation of letters and sounds. And then what else would I do? I would
Like you
see,
could use a handwriting without tears curriculum
yeah,
or loops in other groups. There's a bunch of different curriculum out there. We want consistent motor pattern. We want logical progression based on stroke pattern, not based on the alphabet. So we do all the letters with the first downstroke. We do
right.
all the ones that have a rounded, like we group all of those together so we work on one motor pattern.
And I would decide with the parent and the kid too, like, does this kid need to learn cursive? Because cursive is so much cursive, but I mean, they still have to know how to create even a short phrase or a sentence
Right.
that's reasonable. So we got to pick cursive or print.
Yep.
And of course, typing too,
Yeah.
and start
Now,
early.
depending on what came out of that oral language assessment, which a good speech language pathologist should be able to do. And there are ways to elicit, if the speech language pathologist doesn't own the test, there are ways that the speech language pathologist can elicit this kind of information on an informal basis. Like you can replicate sentence assembly by just cutting apart sentences. Like there's no magic in that. It's the question is, can the student do it? Do they have the flexibility in their understanding of language to be able to rearrange? Um, is the elephant happy? The elephant is happy, right? So looking at that flexibility in lots of different ways. Um, but I want to see, can the student formulate that grammatically correct sentence? What caused the shutdown on the sentence building and sentence combining? Was it the amount of text he was asked to produce? Was it I couldn't handle and I couldn't think of how to combine it? What happened that there was that complete breakdown? And playing with written language, taking the motoric component, meaning the motor component, out of writing
Mhm.
and saying, tell me what you want it to say. My job is to write what you say.
Mhm.
And
Literally.
that's where we watch our kids that you and I both work with just grow exponentially in their ability to really communicate deep thoughts well, as we've, through scribing and modeling over the years, we've produced some amazing writers over the years. Okay, accommodations.
Okay, accommodations. This kid is allowed to dictate to their parents at home to do their homework. This kid does not have to read in front of the class. This
It's
kid
on
gets,
tape.
yeah, books on tape. This kid has extra time to
Time and a half to double time.
double time. Um, let's see what else. This kid can use a calculator for
Mhm.
math. Um, this kid may have to use Mod Math if his letters are so difficult to write. Mod Math's just an app.
To put the math down so you can see his work.
This kid can have his quantity of math. I have a kid that's in advanced math, and he is given a packet of 60 problems. He doesn't need 60 problems.
Right,
For him, that is torture. He
right.
needs to be evaluated which
Let's pick
problems
the ones that are good practice and teach the new concept.
it's not quantity, it's quality. What else would I do with him? I would sniff and make sure that he's able to pay attention to me to see if there's any kind of ADHD that is my teaching being absorbed into him. If it's not, something's
Right.
up.
Graphic organizers would be helpful for writing, like organizing your ideas before you start to go write, using Grammarly, using as he improves his ability to dictate, you can then move to dictating to the computer. Um, Once you find out more about the oral language, that also then drives the work around reading comprehension? How do I teach you to understand what they're saying, not just literally, but figuratively, so that you can read the nuance of what's happening? And that's where curriculum like the Reading Detective is super helpful, because it teaches kids how to go back and find evidence in text to prove the conclusion that they came to from reading the passage. And I would do a lot of, sorry, we're switching off accommodations and back into instruction.
Yeah.
I would do a lot of scaffolding around writing.
Yeah.
Let me teach you how to do fast paragraphs. Um, Priority seating, standard accommodation in a place that's least distracting for him. I think those are kind of the biggies. We need to put up the accommodation list on the website, but because I have a ton of them. Things like breaking tests into smaller parts so that he doesn't have to see it all at once and be overwhelmed by it. But really interesting profile. There's a lot going on there, and I would be finding my next big steps, finding an SLP that can kind of pull things apart and tease things apart. And the speech language pathologist should not just look at the WIAT numbers and say there is no issue. They should want to know more. They should want to know, why is listening comprehension so much higher than the oral expression, and then the reading and writing are so much lower? There's a problem there, and we need to figure out where it's occurring in the language process.
In one sentence, can you keep talking about um, his reading comprehension and his oral expression? To a regular parent, they're saying, but Cindy, that's two different things. Can you show why, in one sentence, why they're so connected?
Sure. You have to be able to listen and understand oral spoken language before you can read and understand written language. You similarly have to be able to speak and speak fluidly and coherently before you could do so in writing. So if you are having gaps and holes back on your oral language profile, it's going to come out in your reading and your written language.
Okay.
And if you don't go back and repair or re-instruct in those areas, you can be doing work on reading until the cows come home and writing until the cows come home, and really not get traction, not because you're not using the right curriculum, not because you're not doing it with efficacy, not because you're not doing it with an engaged child, but because you have fundamental deficits farther back up the system that are prohibiting you making more gains in other places.
That's the part I wanted you to, yeah, that connection.
All right. If you want to send us numbers, we really appreciate getting the scaled scores and the standard scores. This one I had to kind of pull off a graph, which I can do, but it's much easier if you just send us numbers. And we enjoy looking at the profiles and kind of giving you the overview. So I don't want 200 profiles to look at, but yeah, if you've got questions, we're happy to kind of run through it. And it's a great instructional opportunity for clinicians out there to think about what's happening and why, and kind of pulling apart how that all works. Always appreciate your comments.